This is Ask a Quack, a show where you can call in for advanced non-medical advice. The most advanced advice you can get in the world. The most advanced knowledge you can get in the world for living longer, being better, being healthier, resolving your health problems by completely non-medical, traditional, ancient, nutritional, modern scientific means that does not think that disease is caused by a drug deficiency, because it's not. This is Ask a Quack. I am the quack. Does anyone question my credentials as a quack? If anyone can come forth with a single respectable credential, anything from a university, a medical degree, a doctor of chiropractic degree, any respectable license to practice a healing art, a modern medical healing art, I will, with my tail between my legs, slink off and admit that I'm not a properly credentialed or uncredentialed, depending on how you look at it, quack. But I tell you, no one will find such a thing, because I am a true and honorable quack operating without any of those things. Now go ahead, come forth with your questions.
The question is, now that I'm entering into my 30s, I'm starting to fear not having the vigor and vitality of my 20s. And I'm wondering, what can I do to ensure that I carry forward some of that vigor and vitality in order to pursue new avenues and continue ongoing pursuits that I started in my 20s?
That is a question of rare intelligence. And boy, have you called the right place, because investigating how to restore the ancient longevity, and mankind was not meant to live the short, stunted life he does now, is something I spent 10 to 12 hours a day for way more than 50 years investigating this intensely. Now that I'm 70, now that I'm 70 years of age, I continue my researches, and so you have called the right place. You know, right now, there's a lot of talk about how we can extend our lifespan even to 120, maybe even a little more. Now people like David, named after a major oil company, he's out looking for one of the people being subsidized by the very rich, only one people who seem to want to extend their lives these days. People say, oh, the economy is bad, life is stressful. So, most people with no real purpose in life and no real reason to extend what they view as the agony, they're not trying to live for centuries. They're trying to kill themselves off as quickly as they possibly can without the insurance companies deeming it suicide. But they're off busy looking for a drug to extend lifespan, and they've got a few things that burn the candle slower so that you live less and longer. But anyway, they're never really going to find it. Why? Because aging isn't caused by a drug deficiency. Say, I can't find a drug to stop it. On the other hand, restoring our natural lifespan of at least approaching 1,000 years is easy, and we can live so long because it's natural for us to, when we live shorter, only because we work nonstop and hard many times a day, putting our effort into shortening our lifespan and accelerating our way to death, doing as we've trained to do our whole life. And over 199,999,999 of all people do essentially the same thing. Now, there are little pockets of people in obscure places that we know of, more extraordinary people that we don't, because they have a good sense to stay hidden. They've restored part of what might be called the patriarchal lifespan that characterized Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. During that period, lifespan was in the late 140s to the 180s, and Terah, Abraham's father, lived to be 204, something like that. That was during the Gilgamesh period immediately preceding. The rabbis hold that Gilgamesh and Terah, Abraham's father, were contemporaries. They've maintained longevity of a certain sort of pastoral lifespan, but really that's dying very, very young. Before the Earth's last round of great floods, we lived like 8 to 11 times longer than we do now, and we can restore this easily. Boy, you have come to the right place. Why I spent decades and decades and decades of my life, and as my knowledge increased, aging slower and slower, but until my knowledge reached a certain point, which happened around the age of 60, I still aged, and so by the age of 60, where I had reached a biological age of about 50, I was finally able to stop the aging process in its tracks. And at that point, I, of course, continued to become an increasingly Captain America version of the stage of life I already reached. Lady, on the other hand, would become a action heroine version of the stage of life they've already reached. And you can't say it's a millennial. They say, gee, what did you do before you retired? I say, in order to retire, I've had to work first. Little joke there. Not quite literal. There's some meaning to it. I say I did the same thing then that I do now. I'm a mad scientist, a crackpot inventor, a quack doctor, and a cult leader. And what do you say to a millennial? They say, you're a crack inventor? No, not a crack inventor, a crackpot inventor, a psychoceramic, a crackpot. That's someone who, outside of ordinary respectability, invents strange things they're not supposed to invent. And they say, what was the rest of it? A mad scientist, a crackpot inventor, a quack doctor, and a cult leader. Do they respond to cult leader? No. They say, you're a crack doctor. No, not a crack doctor. A quack doctor. Haven't you ever heard of a quack? A quack is someone who practices a healing art without the benefit of respectable credentials or licensure. This gets us just nowhere. So I devoted my life to finding what had changed from these ancient times so that we started rotting so early. Fundamentally, about 5 things had changed. The diet changed radically. The World Health Organization is constantly recommending changes in diet that'll cause us to live 2.7 years longer or something, get 20 to 30% less of certain disease, and thus not overload the medical system while at the same time still leaving plenty of business for the docs. They recommend a diet that instead of having 1 to 3, 500 to 3,000 ORAC units, has 3 to 5,000 ORAC units a day. Notice there's actually a coextension there. There's a borderline there was practically no difference. They claim that this is all they ask of anyone because no one's going to do more than that, but they note that diseases like cancer and heart disease are going to go down 20-25% if you do that. Lifespan is somewhat lengthened because of that. Well, the ancients didn't have 3 to 5,000 ORAC units instead of 750 to 3,000 ORAC units a day. They had 150,000 ORAC units a day. Oxygen radical absorption capability. The level of antioxidant activity in our food, independent of which substances in the food bring it, enables you to compare apples and oranges. There are other such scales, the total antioxidant capability, the TAC scale, but the ORAC scale examines conditions most similar to that inside our biological systems, and so I would say is the most relevant. Still, it's only a rough indication of activity in us, and other considerations have to be considered. But every ancient formulation, an herb that was thought to have activity of a kind that we would credit to antioxidant activity, had antioxidant capability right through the roof. How did they know? They didn't have ORAC scores. Yes, it's valid as anything, and it gives a good indication of what's worth investigating. So the ancients, the mighty ancients, who everybody's mythology told us mismanaged the earth, yet lived lives with the most inconceivable vitality, longevity, and inventive productivity. I mean, in one lifespan, they'd go from pottery to still-age smelting. They'd develop writing. I mean, they lived lives with the most incredible longevity, vitality, and productivity. Indeed, our book of Genesis says their lifespan approached 1,000 years. Oh, it wasn't just Methuselah. Back then, they'd hear that someone died at the age of 760 years, and everyone would go, oh, that's so sad. He was so young. So times have changed profoundly. We see that preservative substances have gone way down. More damage is occurring. At the same time, the substances that allow us to replicate DNA, repair DNA, and so on perfectly, generation after generation of cells. You look at such substances, things like folic acid and so on. The level of these have gone down on the order of 100-fold. 100-fold, not 25% that we can get better with a better diet and we can live a little longer. So the level of repair substances has gone down on the order of 100-fold. The level of preservative substance has gone down on the order of 100-fold. If damage is occurring much faster and repair is going much slower and less perfectly, we're going to break down sooner. Our cells are going to age. And what telomerase has to do with this, and it has a lot to do with this. By the way, Dennis Harmon was right, and all the rest of you stooges out there doing bogus research being paid to mislead, you're wrong and he was right, and I'll reveal at some point how you harmonize Dennis Harmon's free radical theory, which was right, with telomerase considerations, which is vital. The safety of telomerase has been misrepresented. They're putting out dribble of, oh, the free radicals are important signaling messengers, and you can't stop those. You have to have a balance between free radicals and blah, blah, blah. Every meaningful bit of research has shown lifespans are increased as you reduce level activity. And what these specialized idiots or people being paid to misrepresent things do not tell you is that there's no contradiction between certain free radical substances like nitric acid being important as signaling substances and the necessity of squelching them. They don't seem to understand the basic mechanisms of molecular free path. Antioxidants make possible the original short distance between the generation of a free radical for signaling purposes or by unfortunate accident from chemical misbehavior, certain processes in the body, radiation, and so forth, poisons in the diet. These signalers, they're supposed to go an incredibly short distance, deliver their signaling, and then the free radical cascade is supposed to be squelched by a plethora of antioxidant substances so that you have a precision tactical strike by the free radical, and then you stop the cascade of damage before large numbers of cells are destroyed by friendly fire. Just to give it away, because of the danger of mutation and cancer, the cells will not allow themselves to be immortal by producing an endless series of telomerase charged divisions, enabling the end caps of the telomeres, which produces the Hayflick limit, unless there's an adequate level of free radical squelching of antioxidant activity. So there's a very limited amount of damage occurring. Of damage is pretty much within the body's ability to keep up with repair, certainly so that it won't catch up with you dangerously within a lifespan of, say, 1,000 years. Well, now I've gone and given a little away, except that now there's more detail. Now, I'm in the next segment going to quote something an old rabbi said to a powerful Greek general, where he expounded the Torah while standing on one leg. I'll expound to you how we lengthen lifespan to a degree where by ordinary standards it would seem to head towards immortality. And we can go past 1,000 years by additional principles. We can go by the principles that made the antediluvians, the mighty ancients, live approaching 1,000 lifespan, and instead adopt the additional principles of the Malachim, the graduate students of the Atlantean colonies who were maintaining that Mediterranean basin civilization as an experimental colony, along with some others, and they misbehaved and they got busy with the pretty antediluvians. They were pretty good because they weren't all destroyed by free radical damage and weren't malnourished. But really the mistakes that we've all been embracing increasingly since the floods, with each stage of air bringing a further stage of diminution of lifespan, and each stage is reflected in ancient writings, including our work of Genesis. We can opt out of these mistakes. We don't need medicine to change, government to change, the food industry to change. We don't need the food cafeterias. We don't need our parents to change. Just by changing our own choices while continuing to vigorously participate with keener mind and greater ability to use a longer body of experience, because right now, by the time people are beginning to get enough experience to half guess at what life is about and means, they're already too old to do anything about it. They've already gone doodly. Well, they're not encouraging us to live long and prosper with a full and developing clarity of mind, with brains getting larger rather than smaller. Because if we were getting wiser and wiser with age, more and more ability to evaluate longer and longer experience, would we vote the same? And do they really want us on Social Security as it is now all that long? No, a weak, stunted population is easier to control. They're doing well and have power. They don't know if things change, how their power would be affected. They're not going to risk it. They'd rather live powerful and rich with their lifespan stunted with everyone else. And the last stage of this was brought us by Joseph of Egypt. Wendy, come with us. 1, 2, 3. Thanks, Joseph, who made the discovery of a ploy that commanded empires, brought civilizations to their knees in servitude, and enslaved whole cultures, and brought power and riches, yet shortened lifespan. We'll discuss what this was. And Joseph was affected earliest and longest. He alone of his brethren finally had his lifespan cut down to below 120, to levels where modern people sometimes, he died at 118. Unheard of at that time. And his brethren had much shorter lifespan than the patriarchal lifespan. And Jacob was already feeling it when he commiserated with Pharaoh how he was weaker and heading for a shorter life than his mightier ancestors. So you can vigorously participate in this culture with increasing wisdom. You can dance, you can play cards, you can watch movies, you can be on the internet and still live hundreds and hundreds of years. But you have to avoid sins that no minister in any church or mosque or synagogue will ever tell you about. They won't preach on it. They don't understand why dietary regulations have been given so God can stand the stench of us, because in Old Jerusalem, the Hebrew civilization with the Ark of the Covenant, had the Holy Spirit in the Shema Kodesh as a public utility. Put up too much resistance to it, too much heating, break down the insulation where it belongs, and it would explode right in your face. And Moses warned that if we did that, terrible things would happen and the land would spew us forth, which it did. So just to tolerate the stench of us, he gave an absolute minimum subset of things we had to observe to be in the presence of the sanctity. But no, the simply stated laws of Genesis, he didn't enjoin. I mean, they were hinted at tablets he originally brought down, but then he saw us before the golden calf, and God, if we're going to mess around symbolically or otherwise with animals taking the wrong role in our lives and diet, we just weren't worthy of it. So he broke the tablets, thrust them down, went back up the mountain, and gave a set of laws that we could follow. Now, no other people in the region and time were high enough to follow even that, and we had trouble. But 10 fundamental laws with a detailed breakdown of their practice, 613 laws, the digital sum of which is 10, and the children of Abraham were to have a special role. My half-brothers in Abraham were given laws consonant with the Abrahamic role. They too have a system of culture they called halal. I will say the hybrid children of Shem and Ham often excel in longevity. More often you see cases like that of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob among the Arabic people, like the Hunzas and so on, than you do elsewhere. They seem to have more often picked up on the spirit of that, and I find that admirable. In Hinduism, you have pockets that have preserved the secrets of Rasayana. They're able to live for hundreds of years, as some of their sages have, and do till this day. My intention to spill the beans, I tell you, with certain adjustments, such as getting way over 70% of your calories, not room on the plate, because more concentrated foods in very small space provide lots and lots of calories. But I mean more than 70% of the calories provided by fruits and vegetables, preferably temperate climate fruits at that. More on that sometime. And the avoidance of certain errors, you can do very, very well. And if civilization keeps sneaking dietetic and other errors into your life, just like the ancients were given, and this is recorded in coded language right there in Genesis, and also reflected in Gilgamesh, the ancients had sovereign remedies for these mistakes that were already creeping into their civilization, that were the finest antidote to the damage caused by civilized tendencies of diet. And I have created certain formulas, the proto-elixirs. Why are they not called elixirs of life, but proto-elixirs? Because they supply those rare and deficient substances and elements lacking in the modern life and diet. The alchemist within compounds the true elixir using these ingredients. So they supply the ingredients that the alchemist within can form the true elixir of life in more adequate measure. So thank you for asking this vital thing. Of course, you have more access to me, and I hope in the coming period to give you more and more guidance. But all those people, it is my purpose to give man the option of freeing himself from the short, stunted life he now suffers and have the choice, the option. I'm not going to force it on anyone. You can't force it on anyone, because you can lead a horse to water, but if you can get him to tap dance on it, that's really special. So we're going to provide mankind with the choice, the option, the knowledge to have more of the true life that God meant for man. We're going to show the excellence of his design. All this talk of, oh, we're so broken, we're weak, we're flawed. This insults the excellent design that God, through his carefully nudged process of evolution, as revealed by St. Darwin and as revealed by Genesis and in the book of Esther, which proves that God does play dice with the universe, has provided. Sure, we do dunderheaded things because of our fall. Yes, because of the fall, we are now mortal until we cast off the fall, until we rise like the original phoenix, like Enoch. Enoch lived for 365 years, a year of years. Then he was no more, for God took him. Doesn't say he died. Like Elijah the prophet, we can rise to heaven on a fiery chariot. But until then, on that day you shall die. But Adam didn't die. He lived to be almost 1,000 years. What gives? Back then, being made in the divine image, we shared the divine time sense. So we understood when the warning was given to Adam and to mankind that if we ate of the fruit of the tree of das, Das, intimate connection between good and bad, the overcharge of the negative power we take in would be the one thing that could truly harm us, compromise our immortality. But we would still have the consolation of fallen man approaching 1,000 years of vital life to work it all out. And in some cases we did, as shown by the case of Enoch. So it's natural for our lifespan to at least approach 1,000 years. I teach that, and maybe even how to go be. This is a Thor point, but the gods, the Atlanteans, and later the graduate students of the original Atlantean colonies, they could live for 2, 3, 4,000 years. As I said, this is a Thor point, but the Asgardians, unlike the way the Olympians are described, the Asgardians were not immortal, but their lifespan was several thousands of years. And the greater ancient, Odin, the one-eyed god, the one-eyed god, not one-eyed god, the one-eyed god. More on that later. He who was the gateway between the more ancients and those of his 12 children, and what that has to do with the New Testament we'll discuss sometime. Odin, the one-eyed god, in order to stay with him from age to age, he would enter the Odin sleep, where he would arise renewed and regenerated so that he could stay with him on a more eternal basis. But other Asgardians, no, their lifespan was measured in a part of a handful of thousand years, but that was very impressive compared to the mighty ancients who are our ancestors, who lived only approaching 1,000 years. And how this relates to the Gilgamesh epic we'll discuss another time. This is a short, and I've gone on and on. So your mother was right, eat your vegetables. If she said eat rice, she was wrong. White, worthless stuff that'll kill you. And that bread was bad and was reflected in Genesis. And finally, Joseph took us down most of all with it, and we'll go on to it. But for God's sake, avoid grains. Certainly minimize, if you can't eliminate entirely, minimize meat in your diet. The reason refining of grains hasn't shortened lifespans more was because the goodness of whole wheat was never that good. It was already nearly worthless stuff. The refining just completes the process. But for God's sake, avoid refined grains. Eat only a teaspoon or maybe a tablespoon of rice in a great big dish for texture to absorb the last of the sauce. If you have to, eat it. Don't eat white rice ever. It's poison. It's poison. Don't eat it. It'll kill you. It'll kill you. So don't eat it. There are in fact only 3 rice or rice-like products that you should be eating. There's the black forbidden rice. There's the red rice. I'm not talking about red yeast rice, although that's intriguing stuff. And the rice that isn't truly rice, but actually a form of grass, so-called wild rice. These 3 rices, they're almost food. You can eat some of it. And the other rices, avoid. Please avoid. I don't want you all to die. I'm trying to save you. I want you to have fullness of life. I want you to have life and have it more abundantly. I want to save mankind from having to live the short, stunted life he lives now out of ignorance. I want you to have the choice. Sure, you can kill yourself if you want to. I'm a civil libertarian. I believe you have the right to choose this, but for God's sake, those of you who have some purpose in life, choose life, and I'm going to tell you how. And with that, I'm going to end. I promise you more details later. I can tell you how to vampirize God, how to bring down the electrodes from heaven and attach them to the bolts on the side of your neck and bring the monster back to full life. I'll teach you so much. And this in coming episodes. This is your Hierophant and your Quack signing off.